Okay, welcome to class today. We are going to be talking about immigrants and their working conditions here in the States. This is my dog. Okay, so we're going to open it up by asking all the students, what do your parents do for a living? And then they're just gonna think to themselves for a couple seconds. Then we're going to discuss it. And this activity is meant for the students to start thinking about the working conditions that are present today, and then we're going to keep that in mind as we compare it to what the immigrants' working conditions were. Okay, also with this lesson, I would have passed out a guided notes sheet with the keywords which are in red on the slides for them to write in the definitions. Okay, so new immigrants. From 1880 to 1921, a record-setting 23 million immigrants arrived in the USA. These new immigrants were typically young, male, and either Catholic or Jewish. Most spoke little or no English. The majority were unskilled agricultural laborers with little money or education. So, in the little line after new immigrants, you can put in anything that helps you remember what they are. I would probably put something in there like young, male, unskilled laborer from a different country, obviously. Okay, so next, here's some pictures of Ellis Island where a lot of the immigrants had to come through to New York. And here's a little slide about that. And it talks about the requirements. And the important thing for here is that the immigrants had to be able to prove their ability to work. So obviously the United States wanted these immigrants to work in this new country they came to. So if you want to make a note of that, that would be great. Okay, here's just a map of what the city looked like. I'm pointing at the screen. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, the urban environment. Okay, the important thing to remember from this slide is urbanization. And the urbanization, what that means is that people started to move to cities. So before, there were a lot of farmers and people living in the rural areas, in small villages and things. But now they were starting to be more concentrated in big cities like New York, and this was aided by all the immigrants that came in because they generally settled in big cities as well. And so in this slide it says in 1870 only 25% of the population lived in cities, but by 1910 nearly 50% of the population lived in cities. So that's doubling in only 40 years, which is quite impressive. And this period is called the Gilded Age, which isn't super important for this lesson, but if you want to remember that, that would be great. Okay, we're just going to talk a little bit about nativism. I think I said that right. And this is a picture. As you can see, it's the poor immigrant coming in, and then all of the rich established citizens telling him to stop, and they don't want him to come in. Okay, so many American workers accused immigrants of taking jobs away from real Americans. Nativists work to restrict the number of immigrants entering the United States. So we see this a lot today as well, how people don't like the idea of immigrants coming particularly from Mexico because they are stealing our jobs. And so if you can remember that, the same thing was going on during this time, that immigrants were coming from different countries and real Americans felt like they were being robbed of their own jobs. And the same thing because people immigrating from Mexico, especially illegal immigrants, will work for a lot less than real Americans would. And the same thing was happening here. Okay, so here are some pictures of the work conditions they were in. As you can see, it's very cramped. And a lot of people worked in the mines. They look happy. This guy, just the middle guy, looks happy. That's nice. Okay, here's another one. This one looks more like a seamstress workshop, which again was very cramped, and they usually paid not hourly, but by how many articles of clothing you could produce, which means that the faster they went, the more money they got, meaning that their safety wasn't always the first priority. Okay, working conditions. The majority of immigrants worked in industrial jobs. So those pictures we saw before where it's just really cramped in a factory, that is what that would look like. Most immigrants were unskilled laborers. So like we were saying, a lot of the immigrants coming in from different countries had been working on farms. They weren't used to these kinds of working conditions, but they were very desperate for work and willing to accept any kind of work, no matter how unattractive or low paying, because they just really needed money. And so they're desperate, which kind of makes sense why American citizens were having their jobs taken away, because they were not willing to work for as low of wages as immigrants were. Okay, the average worker's salary was about 10 cents an hour, and child workers often made half that. So that is not enough to provide for a family for. Pretty much is what you need to know from that. It's not enough to live on. Many workers were forced to work 12 to 16 hours a day. So this means that, I mean, if you think about that, there's 24 hours in a day. So if you're working 16 hours, that's 8 hours to go home, eat, and sleep. So you're not even getting enough sleep. You're working all these hours, and you're not even making enough to make ends meet. Okay, working conditions were often dangerous, unsanitary, and uncomfortable. So under the working conditions on your guided notes, if you just want to put dangerous, unsanitary, and uncomfortable. Okay. Okay, now we're going to talk about child labor, because at this time, like we were saying before, the immigrants who were working so much still weren't making very much money, not enough to make ends meet, so a lot of times their children would have to go out into the workforce. And here's a picture of some children who worked in a mine. And here's a little diagram of what they would be doing. So the reason why children were able to find work in mines is because a lot of the crawl spaces and shafts within a mine were too small for adults to fit in, and so they would have children crawl in there, which was not very safe, and it resulted in a lot of deaths and injury for the children. And they were getting paid half as much as their adult co-workers. Okay. Here is another picture of children working in more of a factory in an industrial situation. This was, albeit safer than mining, there were still many injuries, loss of fingers and toes and things, as you can see. He's not even wearing shoes. Pfft, silly. Okay, child labor. 1.75 million children joined the workforce in the late 1800s. So again, this is going back to the same period, 1870 to 1910, or what we like to call the Gilded Age. These laborers were mostly between the ages of 10 and 15, but some were as young as 6. So again, when there's small spaces, you want to get the smallest child available to climb in those. So as young as 6, pretty much as soon as they're able to take directions and follow them, they could be working in a mine or in a factory. Children worked up to 15 hours a day in coal mines and factories. So again, 15 hours a day, that's leaving 9 hours for everything else in the day. So they're not getting all the things they need, not all the sleep. They're growing kids, they need all that good stuff. Okay, common injuries included back deformities, asthma, and crushed or broken fingers. Okay, so for this one, under child labor, if you just want to put the age 6 to 15, and then say that there were many injuries incurred and that they worked up to 15 hours a day. Oh, okay, and that is all. And so here, for your homework, what we are going to do is you're going to write a postcard as if you were one of these child laborers, and you're going to be writing back to your family who is still in your native country. So whether that is, wherever you can be very imaginative. Just pick country, maybe Russia or Ireland, places like that. And just tell them about your day and what it's like living in America, in a big city, and what your life looks like day to day. Okay, and then on the bottom of your notes, you have a little exit ticket that matches the vocabulary words with their definitions. So if you want to get with a partner and fill that out, and then as you're leaving, hand that in at the door, and then I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.